Welcome to the Becoming Years. Allow me to welcome the woman behind the voice and journey. Your host, Alina Wilson, is a mother, entrepreneur, aesthetics, wellness clinic owner, and author of Thoughtful Aging, restoring honor to the aging process with intention and grace. Her becoming years have been shaped by courage, reinvention, and wisdom. And the truth is, she is still becoming. Because the becoming years are not about who you were, they're about who you choose to become. No matter your age or your story, we are all still becoming. Alina, the mic is yours.
Welcome to the Becoming Years podcast. This is your host, Alina Wilson, and I'm here today with Deborah. Can you please say your last name for me?
Lukovich.
Lukovich, I got it.
You got it.
She is a depth psychology coach and author of three books, which I want to talk to you about, and her own podcast, The Dose of Depth. I just want to say right up front that this podcast is one that I've been the most excited about because she specializes in women going through midlife transitions and the intersection of sexuality and spirituality, among other things. But when I heard that that's what she was most interested in at this time in life, I could not wait to have this conversation. So with that, Deborah, jump right in.
Thanks. I'm super excited as well. And yes, midlife unraveling and reconstruction is something I'm very passionate about.
Fabulous. Well, I had the privilege of reading the first, probably 1/3 of your book from the minute I met you. I went out and I bought it immediately on Kindle and I started reading it, Your Soul Awakening. I know you've written another book since then. Can you share a little bit about that book too and the message and how that's different from the Soul Awakening book?
Yeah. So Your Soul is Talking. I wrote that after I secured my PhD in depth psychology. So it was sort of my first writing about these concepts. And really in that book, I teach people the different ways their unconscious is speaking to them all day long, every day. And then I infuse stories from my midlife unraveling and reconstruction in them to sort of bring those concepts to life. And also every chapter you've noticed has a try this section. So I'm very big on like application. You know, how do you take these principles? How do you understand them in an embodied way through my stories? And then I provide a framework for how you can come to know, those parts of yourself through the framework. So then I knew I was going to be writing a memoir, but it took 5 years. And my midlife unraveling sort of started or paralleled an irrational calling to go pursue this master's PhD program in the field called depth psychology, which is based in Jungian psychology, but expanded beyond Jung. And it was crazy. It was like a synchronicity. I'm like, I have to have this. It's got to save my soul. And as soon as I made the decision to figure it out, my whole entire life fell apart. So what was interesting is that, and maybe the universe's plan, is that I lived all the theory in real time. And I was led to my research topic, which explored women's experience of reconciling sexuality and spirituality through Carl Jung's theory of individuation. And then I did, the academic stuff. And as soon as I hit submit my final dissertation to my chair, that week, I was like, what am I going to do with the 20 hours a week that was just freed up? And I basically vomited out 50,000 words into a Word document of all the juicy parts of my story that weren't appropriate or needed in the dissertation. And I didn't know how to write a story. It was all the memories. And then I followed another synchronicity and got involved in a writing group. And 5 years later, I don't know if we're doing video too, but ta-da! So my book, When Sex Meets God, A Midlife Unraveling, I just published in November. So it's the personal part.
I have written a book, and that is no easy task. And I can imagine the hours and hours you poured into this. There's such a process that you go through as a writer, putting words on paper, and even in conversations with people. How much is too much? What do we share? What the things that we think are insignificant are the things that people actually want to hear about. What was that process like for you in retelling your story?
Well, like I said, it was another synchronicity that brought me to, and I'm always promoting them, an online writing community called The Right Practice, founded by Joe Bunting. And that's where I learned how to do it. So those first 50,000 words were really like the middle. It was all the juicy stuff, all the stuff about online dating and being swept up in an ironic love affair and my mother wound and getting divorced and all of this. Oh, not the getting divorced part of it wasn't even part of it. And so what I loved about the community was that it was so collaborative. In order to get feedback, we had to give feedback. So it was this constant give and take. And the way that I sort of built out the rest of my memoir was through people saying, "Oh, I don't understand why you stayed married for 24 years." And I was like, what do I go back and share that helps people understand how I got here? So then I, went back and I filled in some blanks. And then it was really this process of people asking me questions, because the middle part, unraveling, and the reconstruction was kind of in current time. But how were people going to understand how I got there? And then after that is sort of this, how was I going to tie it up, and how was I going to end it? And it was really the same thing. So I love it. I would never ever write another book again without getting like 50 people to help me work on it along the way.
Well, I know one of the things that you wrote about in your soul talking book, it was what that really resonated with me was this idea of being eternally optimistic. I think that's how you said it, and correct me if I'm wrong. But when I read that, because that has been me my entire life, and it's so much a part of who I am, this need to be positive and to find the silver lining. And I can look back at younger versions of myself and recognize that my survival legitimately depended on me not curling up in a ball and sinking into the ground and never coming out again. Like, I had so many times in my life where the alternative to optimism was literal ruin, not just for
Yeah.
myself, but for the little children that I had that I was raising on my own.
Yeah.
Those are not easy decisions to make, but I had never thought about it before the way that you explained it in your book as being something that actually created blinders. And I know that this was true for me in my marriage. And you
Yeah.
mentioned, you talked a lot about your experience living with an alcoholic. I had the same experience. And you are so right. You wake up. For you, it was every Monday morning. For me, it was usually after 2 to 3 weeks of repeated, behavior. You wake up, oh, it's going to be better now. That eternal optimism
Yeah.
creates a platform for, and I won't say it's conscious denial, and this is why I'm so glad you're here, because you're an expert in the unconscious, subconscious, but it's the thing that we rely on to continue to get through each day without realizing that it could potentially become something that holds us back.
Yeah. I mean, it can
What
be
are
a
your
defense.
thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I love how you touched on the light and dark side. So all traits have a light and a dark side, right? And it's kind of a moving target. And so the red flag or the clue that you might be in the dark side is if you identify, right? So I was very adamant that I was an eternal optimist. So that became part of my identification, my identity. And then you're wading into the dark side, because the eternal optimism then made me blind to the truth of addiction, right? Like, so it wasn't true, right? And actually, that I don't know what I describe in there, but it's interesting how it happened, how I had the insight. I was sitting at a bar, one of my places where I go have some dinner and study. And I was talking to the bartender who knew my story, right? And I'm like frustrated because, my former husband is binge drinking again and he's causing all this suffering and I don't understand. And the man next to me, who I was not including in the conversation, says something like, just hang in there or something like that. And I was just like, what? And all of the repressed anger, all of the anger that I didn't allow because I had to stay, I don't know, I had to stay grounded because he wasn't grounded, right? And I had to allow myself to not be eternal, to just be like, F that. What? Eternal optimism? No. I do have optimism that I'll figure this out, But like hoping every Monday is going to be different. No, that's just blind. Those are just my blinders, because I don't want to, because what happens is that it's actually not the truth of the situation that people are afraid of. It's all the decisions that they anticipate having to make that they just drown in all these like potential scenarios that will play out, and they don't, and they get overwhelmed by it. So it's not really like the truth. It's like, oh my God, but if I acknowledge the truth, then I have to do something about it. And doing something about it really involves hurting people, right? So
I couldn't agree more. There was a time in my marriage where I used the justification of I'm not going to leave because I don't want to clean out the garage. Like human beings can justify everything, and then
right,
that
yeah.
was just one more reason to like, oh, hang in there, it can get better. Or what do you think about this idea that, and I know that I experienced this, there's a sense of failure almost if we make a decision to change, make a big change like that, whether it's leaving a job, leaving a marriage, pursuing a new career at an older age, leaving a friend group. Leaving friends can be difficult too. There's this sense of failure of like we should be able to manage it all, like overachievers. Terry Cole writes about this, the high functioning codependency, and she's a brilliant writer and speaker as well. But we are so used to keeping it all together for everyone. You touched on this too, like you were surprised when you started making life changes and the people around you didn't fall apart. They were all still surviving and thriving and living in in their same little capacities.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's complicated, right? And I'm not sure, like, I think too many people have adopted like what society says, that it's a fear of failure, when sometimes it's not really that. So for me, I didn't ever have a fear of failure. However, if I didn't know the right thing to do, that's where my angst came from, right? Because if I knew, once I realized I had done what I could and I did some inner work and I took 18 months to prove to myself that, okay, leaving this relationship is the right thing, not only for me, but for my children, no problem. I could do it. It doesn't matter how hard it is. So, and I was the one who had to explain to my children, like, getting divorced after 24 years is not a failure, man. That's pretty good. Like, that's pretty good. Like, I was sitting with my daughter. I think she at the time was probably like 15. And I said, I don't know what to do with this engagement ring. Do you want it? Should I give it to you? And she's like, I don't want a symbol of your failed marriage. And I was like, okay. And later on, and I ended up selling it. So I'm like, oh, and then she's like, do you still have that ring? I'm like, no, you snooze, you lose. So no, so what's complicated, and this is why you need to do the work, is whatever those feelings are, sometimes we don't really know what the exact feeling is, but we'll grab onto a label that somebody else has said. But really, to do the work to find out what really is happening there, what is the fear, is to discover what your parental complexes are, right? So what are the patterns? So what is the pattern of behavior and reaction that we're having that's not helpful anymore? But maybe it was, because it got us through certain parts of our life, but this is not helpful anymore. Being an eternal optimistic is not helpful anymore. So, so where does that come from? And those come from early childhood experiences. So if I was working with someone and they said, oh, and they thought it was a fear of failure, I would listen to them tell me why they thought that. And then I would say, okay, whatever that emotion is, where is it in your body? Because that's a clue. And then I would say, what is your earliest memory of feeling that in that situation? Hang in there. It'll come up. It'll come. Sure enough. Oh, I was 7. Oh, this happened. Oh, it was my sister and it was my parents, and off we're running. And then we can really discover what really is it. So sometimes it's actually not helpful to like assume that you have another example is when I had gotten divorced and I was doing I think I had just met this younger man, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah, there's that thing. And I had reconnected with my inner child through drawing, actually. So my inner child was like, whoa, what? You're letting me out. I want to have all this fun. And soon I had this other voice that was like, no, 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 you can't do that. You can't do that. And so with my colleagues, when I was in school, we did what's called active imagination. That's a Jungian thing. And so we would just imagine, and they're like, okay, tell us about this voice. And I'm like, oh, it's a man. All right, well, what is this man wearing? He's wearing a suit. Oh, he's kind of dressed as a lawyer. So here I thought it was a judgmental voice. So a lot of people also will say, well, I have a harsh critic. And I'm like, wait. Just let's not assume that's what it is. And I thought, okay, what does a lawyer do? A lawyer makes his case. So the lawyer voice was just saying, hang on, you're being really different here. You're going into work with a hangover? You're dating a man that's like 13 years younger than you? What's happening here? And he just wanted me to listen. Have you thought this through? And he's like, okay, I'm done. So he wasn't a judge. He just wanted me to listen. So moving forward, I personified this voice. That's another sort of tool, depth psychology tool. And when that voice was there, I would journal and I'd say, hey, inner lawyer, I see you're there again. Why are you here? And literally he'll answer back in your imagination. Well, I'm here to remind you about something. Okay, what do you want to remind me about? And I don't remember what that conversation was, but I learned to just listen to him and not panic. And then he would say his piece and he'd go away. And my inner lawyer hasn't showed up in years. But for a time during my reconstruction period, as I was becoming somebody new, there was this back and forth between this new, part of me that had been repressed for many decades. And then this old, overly responsible part of me that was like, oh, you're making me nervous. So that's kind of a couple of examples that, again, just people like adopt certain things that have become in vogue to say, like reparenting yourself. Now I don't like that anymore because it just becomes too generic.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that restructuring process and what that was like for you? Because I know, and here in this aesthetics clinic that I run, I talk to women every day, every week who are going through oftentimes some big life transition. And this restructuring that we do as women, it typically has a lot to do with what you just talked about, the voices that are trying to keep us where we are, whether it's to keep us safe or whether it's to keep us controlled. But we have this innate desire and this burning desire to return to ourselves and to who we are. And sometimes that work can just feel so overwhelming. And where do you even start? And I know that you've been through this process. Where did you start in your restructuring process, and what did that look like for you?
Well, there's a depth side. Well, alchemy is a great metaphor for describing the process. It's intense, and to do it without a guide, it can be very risky, right? So there is a part of this process that we call dismemberment. Like you literally feel like you're being pulled apart. And for a 2-year time period during this experience, I used an image journal to capture what was happening where it wasn't ready for words in a journaling document, right? So sometimes what's happening inside you cannot be expressed through words. And then that's even scarier, right? And that's even harder because there just are no words. So poetry, I use the tanka format, which has a couple more lines, a little more syllables than haiku. And then also journaling. And I remember one of the images was a puzzle, but all the puzzle pieces had spaces in between. So they weren't quite linked, but it was a picture. And I don't even know how I drew it. I don't even know isn't that crazy? I don't think I could draw that on purpose now because I literally drew like a bird and a flower and a tree. But yet they were puzzle pieces and there was space between them. I had many drawings where all I did was take a black color pencil and do this in a circle and color in a circle and color it in and and then suddenly I'd look back and I go, wow, that's a lot of black, a lot of dark, but there's this little space in the middle. I'm going to draw that yellow, right? So this circular motion is a mandala shape. And when mandalas and circular shapes and that kind of dynamic comes up in your dreams and your life, that is literally your psyche holding you together during this process. So it can feel really dramatic and really intense. Now, I was studying theory at the same time. If I wouldn't have been doing that, I don't know. I don't know I don't know what would have happened to me. I don't know where I would be. And I think part of like the synchronicity and this parallel journey of me being called to live these theories was so that I could take other women through this process. I have been through it. And I can remember like being somewhere reading about being in the grip of a complex as I was in the grip of a complex at a bar. Like, oh my God, why did I just accept a glass of wine from that man when he creeps me out? Like, oh my God, I want to take a shower. Like, oh, that's what it is. You're like, why did I do that? I didn't want to do that, but I still did it. That's called being in the grip of a complex. So, yeah, it's so another point during the process is, okay, so before I was gotten divorced, I recognized this dynamic in certain communications with my former husband. So by the way, we didn't know, it was a complete surprise to the two of us that he was an alcoholic. It's just one day we're just like, oh, it's so obvious now. Like, what? I noticed it first, and then he's like, what? And then he's angry and all of that. So that was kind of mind blowing. But I identified, so with addiction, there's some narcissism and manipulation, right? So I identified in a certain kind of conversation when I needed help, he would say, oh, but I would say, I'm stressed. Can we figure a strategy out? And he'd say, well, I'm helping. And then I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say you weren't helping. And so then we didn't even talk about, right? And so I learned, oh, I need to respond that in a different way. And in the moment, I'd be like, oh, there I am, but I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to do the opposite of what I usually do. I usually talk my way through it. Nope, zip, walk out the door. Now, so I became aware of a pattern, right? And I knew I needed to change it, but I didn't know. So there was this time when I said to my Jungian analyst, I said, I feel like I'm in this doorway, this threshold. And I know one thing I'm shedding. I get passive aggressive now. I didn't understand what it was. And now I get it. I can spot it. And now I'm responding in a different way. And this is only one little thing, right? I said, but I don't know what to replace it with. I don't know what I'm becoming. And I feel like I'm floating and not grounded. So that's another thing that can be very disorienting, is that you are not grounded when you're in between, right? And so I didn't know this at the time, but at the time, there was a time when in the morning, I really sort of lingered in my getting ready time for the day. And I realized that when I was done getting ready, I would rhythmically wipe down the white porcelain sink and like literally shine and not until later did I realize that little obsession was to help me feel grounded, that at least I could clean up this mess. At least I could control this.
Yeah.
Right. And then the rest of the day or the rest of my life, I don't know what I'm going to do with. Right. So sometimes like you'll unconsciously and intuitively adopt certain coping mechanisms. But if you don't have a framework, and I guess like that's what I bring this framework so that it's all normal, right? This is all part of the process. And then you can also adopt a sense of humor about it. So for me, there were a couple of moments. This is before I started my education, and it was bad. Like everything, my business fell apart. My son said he didn't want to live, like everything. And I was just like, okay. And I was addicted to Oprah's Super Soul Sunday. I was reading Deepak Chopra. I was like, what do I grab onto? And one day I said, okay, I know that no matter what, there's a light at the end of the tunnel and I'll be a stronger person after this. I have that core belief. Now, a lot of people don't have that core belief, but I did. That I knew there will be good coming out of this and I'll be stronger. And then I said to myself, I said, damn, I'm in that movie. I'm in a movie about the alcoholic husband and this and that. And it's a story that lots of people live. It's not only my story. I'm not alone in this story. So if you also can find like your mythic tale, your mythic story, then you can kind of go, oh, this is kind of where I'm going. Like I can kind of see what's ahead of me. And then that just, it takes away a little bit of the anxiety, of the messiness and the chaotic nature of the process.
What I love about what you said, there are a few things that really stood out to me. First of all, it was a 2-year process, you said. These changes didn't happen overnight for you, and they certainly didn't happen overnight for me. And I think that we have a tendency as women to want to just rush through these changes or think that we should be moving more quickly through them. But when you mentioned just identifying areas of your life where you wanted to grow and needed to grow, you mentioned recognizing being passive aggressive, just starting with one thing at a time rather than getting overwhelmed with all of the things that you had to do in that moment or that day to try and catapult yourself forward. And the other thing that I heard you say about this is that you allowed yourself grace for the growth process itself. And I think that is so important because we're not used to treating ourselves as kindly as we treat others in most cases. And then you had a framework and you had help. You had another person to reflect with and to grow with. Yeah. And I think that those are all foundational for touch points of growth for women as they're going through transition. Just hearing you say that you were, I don't know if you used the word floundering, if that's just me showing what my experience was, but it was really helpful for me to just hear you say that you felt a little bit lost in this, that you knew you didn't want to be where you were, but you didn't quite know how to get where you wanted to go. And then creating a visual through the movie analogy of not being alone, of community, just the simple recognition that there are other women going through what you've been through and they made it through, and then there are women coming behind you and behind me that are going to go through it and they're going to be okay too.
And I would say,
so curious. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add that the one thing I meant to add, addition to there's a light at the end of the tunnel, I'm living that movie, is to find a sense of humor, because I took myself in the first part of my life very seriously, and I had a very strong persona. I am an INFJ, which means people really don't know me unless they probe. And so I'm very in control of my emotions. And I think if I didn't saying I'm in that movie was part of this is ridiculous that this is my life, that if I wouldn't have taken on a sense of humor about myself, I might have become depressed. So I naturally developed, and out of that came a part of my personality that I didn't know I had. So it is interesting. At one point, my kids started saying, "Mom, you're just accidentally funny." And I'm like, oh, I don't know. How do I replicate that if it's an accident? What is that? What do you mean? And I just started so where I had went the first part of my life, thinking I had to impress people all the time, right? Now I'm blurting out what's happening to me. And I'm blurting out, this experience at the bar and how this younger man unleashed my buried sexuality. And I'm telling my dating stories. And there were always I'm oversharing. I went from not sharing anything or being vulnerable to oversharing. And this happens. It's called compensation. And you have to give yourself grace because you're going to embarrass yourself. And then you come back and you kind of find your middle. But there were always some people who were oh my God, I'm living vicariously through you. They thought my stories were interesting and also amusing and entertaining. And that's how my memoir is. So that was part of me finding part of myself was this entertaining nature of who I am that I didn't know was there. And then the other thing is that you said 2 years. Now, it took me, the 18 months was just from start to finish about, okay, I think I don't want to be married. And I could talk about the recurring dream that I realized that this deep truth I was hiding from, that I think it's even hard for me to say now, I shouldn't not want to be married anymore. Right. So from that moment, and then okay, I need to figure this out. I did all this work on me at one point after journaling about what did I learn about love as a child from Ianla Van Zant's book. In the meantime, I write this prose. I had 50 lines and I say, to myself, well, I've got to learn to be more honest with my husband. If I'm going to do everything I can to see if I can save my marriage, I've never actually been vulnerable with my own husband. So we go someplace and I say, I want to read this to you. And he's looking at me like, oh my, like, I think he thinks I'm going to yell at him. And instead, I'm like, this is a story about a little girl. Her mother said she could do anything, but her mother undermined her all along the way. And then she went off and did this. And then she met this man. She knew he would respect her, blah, 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 blah. And I just kept, like, it sort of captured 6 months of journaling of my story and how I came to where we are right now. Now, that was so vulnerable for me to do. And I'm sure he was equally vulnerable. And I thought, okay, I'm just going for it. And he says, so you're trashing our whole marriage. So that's what he got out of that. Yeah. So I was just hoping for, like, I'm sorry you feel that way. But that was like, told me the truth of the situation. So you see, I had to do that though. So that was part of, like, I can't just walk away. I need to be honest. And part of my ending my marriage was, from now on, I have to be honest with every man in my life, including my father. And there's something I talk about in my memoir about my father complex and, addressing him directly about some things. So anyway, so it was 18 months for me to actually just get to the point where, like, okay, now I know that it is okay for me to end my marriage. So there were time before that. And then there's years after that. So I think about, but this is the other thing I wrote down, is being curious, because our stories, our lives are so interesting. And if you can just, like, it's like getting a PhD in yourself. There's nothing more exhilarating to me than this process. And in fact, I just have recently had another man experience, and my friend says, Deb, you're the only one at your age that is having fun being out there. And I'm like, yeah, it's encounters, and I don't know what's going to happen. And, like, what am I learning about myself and them and the awkwardness? It's lovely. It's beautiful. So I remember many years ago listening to Jane Fonda. I bet this is 15 years ago. And she says, she's talking about when we first started talking about perimenopause. So at 40, this is 20 years ago, I was plunged into perimenopause because of stress. I didn't know that was really my marriage, kind of what was going on. But I remember her saying that for 10 years, she was lost. Like, the world didn't know this, but she said, I was lost for 10 years. And then suddenly I had this new sense of clarity and purpose. I'm going to agree that it's like 10 years, but it has these different phases. It's not all bad. Like, when I knew that I made the decision finally to get divorced, I lost 15 pounds because I had been hanging on to something that needed to be released. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm playing beach volleyball. I'm doing cartwheels. I'm dating, and every man is 17 years younger than me. And then I get swept up. Like, it was exhilarating. And then there was another phase. So it was almost like the universe rewarded me for doing the hard work, which was letting go of a relationship so that I could be free and liberated. And then I was free and liberated and having fun. And then it was like, oh no, I have to leave a 6-figure job because my soul can't stand it anymore. No, I should be able to like a 6-figure job. No. Oh God, what? Now I can't find another job. I have to bartend. I have to do landscaping work. So then I had to go through all this, like, undoing of my persona having to do with finances. Now, that's not part of all women's journey, but it was part of my journey. And then there was coming out the other end. And then there was trust, following synchronicity. Oh, people are coming to me for coaching. Oh, I write the soul book in 90 days. Oh, I launch a podcast in 2 weeks. And oh, like, what's happening to me? So when you, like, go through the battle of the opposites that are, because everything is driven by these forces inside that are in opposition. And as you reconcile them, there is a creative unleashing. And that could be the type of creative expression I had, or it could be something else. It could be a new relationship. That could be creative expression. Or it could be, I'm leaving the corporate world and now I'm doing this and I don't care about earning six figures or whatever it is. So I gotta say, 10 years is probably on, but it has these little mini phases in between where you get rewarded enough to go through the next phase. And then by then you're like,
downs.
Yeah. And it's not even like, I don't know, I don't even look at it as downs anymore. This is where the curiosity comes in, because from a neuroscience perspective, here's what's going on. Your central nervous system is used to a certain state and a certain identity. And so when you challenge that, it's like a rubber band, right? You expand, but then it panics. It has a DEFCON moment and it pulls you back and you feel like that's regression. I called it mini crashes for a while, where I would feel anxiety, not motivated. I'm like, oh my God, this business isn't going to work, but I keep doing my work. So what's happening is then your nervous system is getting used to feeling safe where it didn't feel safe before. So the more that you can understand, like, you're not doing anything wrong. It's not your motivation. It's not your willpower. It's your central nervous system, right? So we can call on depth psychology, neuroscience, quantum theory, and spiritual principles. I call on all four of those frameworks when I work with people. So sometimes some language is good in a certain phase and other language is good in another phase. Sometimes it's dreams is how your unconscious is speaking. Other times it's we need to draw. I have a client who paints like crazy right now. That's her way of like processing the sessions that we have. And she's a beautiful painter too. So I mean, oh, it's luscious.
I've had a similar experience where people have said they're living vicariously through me. And I think thank you for sharing that, by the way. One of the things that I took away just from that beautiful moment of wisdom with you was just that getting to a liberated state allows you to access different parts of yourself that maybe have been dormant for a while. Like you mentioned, your sense of humor, being able to laugh at yourself, give yourself grace, letting other people see a different side of you that's not so driven by logic and brain function, and being called back into your body, the somatics of the way that we live. That is so, so, so important. And I'm wondering, in your experience of dating, was your body talking to you in any of those experiences in ways that were new and different? Or, okay, so let me give you an example. I was out on a date with somebody and I knew sitting across from them, they seemed very kind, they were very respectful. There really wasn't anything, consciously that I could see in this person that would make me not want to go out on a date with them again. But my throat kept feeling tight and kept closing when I thought about going out with them again. I think with women, we want to just do it like a checklist, like ABC. Like, this is easy to do. We should be able to do it without a problem. But it's really not easy to, but it's fun if you're using it as a way to learn more about yourself. And when you're in a place of choosing rather than waiting to be chosen. Yeah. Were any of your experiences with dating like that, where you were just learning about your body in a different way when you were out with these men?
So, there's so much there. What I would say is that, here's a Jungian term, projection. We relate and learn about ourselves only through projection and relating with other people. Period. That's it. So
unpack that for me. Tell me more.
Unfortunately, we need experiences with other people to learn about ourselves. Now, the thing about women and intuition, this is just a little side thing. Sometimes when women feel fear, and they feel like, oh, I'm getting bad vibe. Sometimes it's not your intuition, it's fear. So your intuition shouldn't cause you to feel fear. Your intuition should cause you to go, oh, I can tell this is like, I don't want to be with this man. So it's tricky because sometimes the fear is what then needs to be explored. Now, if you're feeling yucky about, definitely don't go on another date with somebody, but it's very interesting that your throat chakra was activated. So we don't know, like that could be either way. Right. Like, I don't know. It would be interesting to explore what was the deeper meaning of that. It could have been, he could have triggered a reminder. I would have asked you, like, what's your earliest memory of that experience? And it might have.
Childhood, for sure.
Oh, okay. So there you go. So
Yeah.
there was something about being with this man that reminded you. And so really the work then is to go back and say, but you're not, what happened back then, of course. And was there a situation where you weren't allowed to speak, right? So it could be some kind of authority complex, right? And this man reminds you. So, because our unconscious, Carl Jung would say, between you and me are 4 conversations happening. We're only conscious of 20% of the communication going on between you and me right now. Most of it's happening between our unconscious, and they're having fun in there. Our conscious it's like a playground in there. Yeah. So we don't really know. So it could have been a moment for you to realize that that is your child's self that is being activated. And no, my work is to speak, right? And you could have asked, like, after the date, you could have journaled and said, was there something under that I wanted to say that I wasn't saying? So one of the things, so now I'll go back to my dating because it was fascinating. And I tell all these stories and I hope they end up being, I want my book to be a Netflix series because these are really great episodes. And I realized that, first of all, I had a lovely time. I had a great experience with my dating. My first the first thing I'll say is often in relationships and in a marriage, it is the presence of another person, an affair. That is the instigator, right? Now, many people mistakenly believe that then they're the one, they're the answer. And really, many times it's just the role that they played was that you weren't courageous enough to just be honest and leave, but it's okay. The affair is not, it's not a good or a bad thing. That's what got you away. Now, the mistake is that some people go into those people's arms and later on they see the red flags. They're like, I thought you were so different. Oh, this is feeling familiar, right? There's all of that. Now with me, what's interesting is I didn't want to be with any men. I was just like, oh, no, I need to take care of my kids. I got a new job. I'm working on a master's PhD. But my lover was C.G. Jung. I literally fell in love with C.G. Jung, and he also became my spiritual mentor. So I'm like getting back to serious, overly serious again. And so it was right after my 50th birthday, and I knew I was going to be getting divorced, but I hadn't filed yet. It was just a formality at that point. And so I'm sitting at the tiki bar at the beach, and there's this energy, and I'm like, what is happening to me right now? And that younger man ends up being on my volleyball team, and we have a very awkward 4-month thing, and he ends up being my first sexual encounter. So what was interesting about that is finally, like, he directly asked me out on a date, and I end up in his apartment, and man, I'm so nervous. I can't even kiss him. I literally laugh. Like, he kisses me and I laugh and I'm like, oh my God, you're the first man I've kissed since my husband. And in my head, I'm going, TMI, why did I share that with him? That's not cool. And then he's like, tries to put his hand up my shirt. And I'm like, am I in high school? Like, what's happening here? And I'm just like, I gotta go. And I think, okay, I just blew that, right? And then we go on to have this weird, awkward thing. And then I do end up having one sexual encounter with him. And it was like perfect. It was lovely and kind and relaxing, not mind blowing. And I just remember rolling in his bed naked and just like, oh, felt so nice. And that was it. Well, then he opened me up and then he fell off the face of the earth. And I was like, how could you do that? You opened me up. Now I need this. Now I need more of this. So I had to hit online dating. Now that was fascinating because here was my attitude. I wasn't looking for anything. As you can see, my unconscious decided that this was going to be my experience. Now I'm going to be aroused again. And all I told myself, and this is what I recommend all women do, is that I've been with one man for 24 years. I need to learn how to relate to men again. And before that, I even had a whole series, and I talk about this in the chapter, of I had to learn how to set boundaries. Once I knew the safety of my marriage was sort of gone, the psychological safety, it was really weird what happened to me. So I got through that phase, and my online dates were It was like a curriculum that was planned for me, each one. So I went through the phase where my first OkCupid date, that man, all I wanted was like hard pounding sex. And he literally was like, why do you want to have sex with me so much? And I'm thinking, why are you complaining? And I'm like, I don't know. I just do. Shut up. Let's just, but it wasn't tender. It wasn't anything. So I went through that. And then my next online man, we're friends now, and I've interviewed him, my PhD man, I call him. He was tender and kind and the best. All I wanted to do was like make out with him for like a half hour. And finally, like I'm at his place, and suddenly I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I have performance anxiety. And he's like, oh yeah, I got my hangups too. And, so I was learning how to come into relationship with my body and my sexuality. And then I have some other experiences, and I even do I'm in one of my bars that's owned by somebody who kind of would act like my big brother, because I do all my dates there, my first date, so he could kind of keep an eye on me. And I walk in and he's like, hey, here, this is this guy. He's like a wine salesman on the side. And we're just chatting and we're sharing pictures. We're both divorced, sharing pictures of our kids. And suddenly I look at him and I'm like, I'm not even attracted to him, but I want to have sex with this man.
What was that about?
Oh my God. Well, so we go to his place and it's like literally like a scene. I mean, he's kind of, I don't know. He was sweaty. He picks me up, grabs my ass. We go in his room and we have this sweaty sex. And then we're done. And I'm like, God, if I smoked, I'd have a cigarette right now. Like, I needed that. And he's like, I needed that too. And we're both like, we've never done that before. So then I leave and I'm like, check. I guess that was on the list of me to do. So I have these series of dates. And then I'm like, okay, my brain is on fire. I'm done. That was enough. And 6 weeks later then is a different experience. So here's the other thing, is that when you do the personal work, I was purposely exploring myself through these dates. So my ego was kind of in charge. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done. Other than I'm at the beach studying and I say, it'd be cool if a good looking guy would come up to me. And suddenly I feel this hot stare. That was it, man. Then comes my swept up ironic love affair, where now it's like these archetypal forces of Aphrodite and Hermes taking over our bodies. And that's the crux of that ironic love affair, is then what caused me to reconcile the deeper wounds of sexuality and spirituality in a way that you would not predict. You would not see it coming. So that's a long answer to your...
more about that? No, I love that. Everything that you just shared with me, it is so familiar to me, not just from my own lived experience in many ways, but also with the women that I talk to. And there's just this uncertainty of knowing what to do and what's the right thing to do. And you mentioned projection. I think a lot of times we go into these situations where we're projecting our needs onto this other person before we've actually learned how to meet our own needs.
Yes.
And in those cases, we're setting them up for failure right out of the gate, because there's no way that they can meet needs for us that we haven't even learned to meet for ourselves.
Yeah. But we won't know, right? We won't know until we have the experience. So I love working with women who are dating. I love it, man. I'll help them with their profile. I'll help them prepare. I'll help them with everything. And, so I say, here's what you're going to do. You're just going to go be curious. You're just going to go be curious. And then we're going to debrief it. And we'll talk about the deeper meaning of what was happening and what you sensed in him. Because my recent experience, I was the victim of all the projection. And I was like, wow, it wasn't me. It was this man. And it was like, and because I do this for a living, I was like, I knew what the meaning of his intense attraction for me was, because I am pretty whole at this point. Right. So
right.
I don't really need anything. For me, it's like, is an adventure, right? Like this is I call them encounters now. I don't even call them relationships, and I created a framework for finding the deeper meaning of relationships called 3 Ps. So I can send you that link. You can share with people. They can just take it, and it's purpose, projection, and permanence. So what kind of trips people up is that they have a fantasy already, right? Like I'm looking for somebody to complete me. And that's not love, that's neediness, right? And so neediness is based in fear. So you're either in
That's so good.
fear. Yeah, you're either in fear or love. You can't be in both. And so there's a whole other level, I don't know if you've experienced, of ecstasy and depth in relationships when you do become more whole. It's so amazing. It's so amazing, actually. Yeah. But the process to
Well,
get there is fun.
and if I know in my lived experience and from what I've learned, you can't go deeper in relationship or in love with someone than you've been with yourself. You can't
Yeah.
expect more from them than you've been able to experience
Yeah.
yourself. Even
Yeah.
though ideologically we think, oh, I want that, but if you're not becoming the person that you want to date, then you won't have the capacity for that, even if it finds its way to you. The right person at the wrong time is still the wrong person.
Yeah.
And I love to know more about how your experience has led you to this intersection of sexuality and spirituality. And yes, I do want the three P's. I know you just got into that, but there's so much to talk about here.
I
I'm
know.
loving this.
Oh,
I'm loving this.
but let's do the juicy stuff.
Okay.
So what was interesting is that it was another man they're all exactly 33 years old. And I didn't realize until like my last podcast interview that that's my numerology number is 33. And I was like, okay, all right. Anyway, so we meet at the beach and it's a mutual sweeping up. It is a mutual, like, it's amazing. And I felt like affection and desire. I mean, just kissing, touching face. Oh, that I just had never felt before.
Like, was it like a magnetism, like this electric magnetic kind of a thing?
There was definitely forces flowing through each of us. Like it was bigger than us, like even from the beginning. And what's interesting is we went on and God, we went on for weeks and I just wanted to touch him. I wanted him to kiss me so my body. So this was like another embodied experience, but in a way I hadn't experienced before. And after like 6 weeks, in my head, I'm going, I wonder when we're going to have sex. So with the other guys, there was like, I want to have sex, right? And with him, it was just like, and it was so sweet. And at one point, I sort of am like, I really would, like to. And he's like, oh, you would, huh? And we had one experience, but then we mostly just like hung out and just touched. And so then there's one night we're having dinner at my house. The kids are with their dad and I'm thinking this is the night that we're going to have. And oh man, we're in front of a fireplace drinking wine and I'm getting all excited. And suddenly he says, can I tell you something? I feel conflicted having sex outside of marriage. And in my head, I was like, what? You're a 33-year-old guy who's like that now? And I'm like so mad. And he says, do you still want to hang out with me? And I'm like, yeah. So now, then later on, because I'm studying depth psychology, I'm journaling like, what is happening here? And why did I say yes? And I thought there is a deeper meaning and I have to see this through. So then I enter this phase that I call no sex, where it is a kind of, in fact, this is when I had a Kundalini experience. So he was over. And so we were very affectionate, passionate, and desire, but there wasn't penetration, if I could say that on your podcast. And so during one day or whatever, one afternoon, we were laying in my bed and we had our tops off, but our bottoms on. And he's like laying on his stomach, napping. And I'm laying on top of him and I'm merging with him. Like I'm literally like, I feel his heartbeat. Our heartbeats are syncing. I like don't know where I end. And then I have an image that comes up of him between my legs pleasuring me. And I'm like, oh, hello there in my imagination. This is in my imagination. And then suddenly his face turns into a giant serpent that wants to enter me. And I'm having a little battle inside. So I'm like, that's so wrong. Like I clench my muscles. And then I'm like, Carl Jung is in the background going, no, that's a symbol. Allow the symbol. I mean, I'm a nerd that way. And so I allow this serpent. So the serpent, the snake that you may know is not only a symbol of transformation, but it is a symbol for the goddess before there was a word goddess. So I have this experience. And if I would have moved, I would have like exploded, but I didn't because I was freaked out. And I journaled that I felt like I connected with an ancient feminine realm. So part of my journey reconciling sex and God had to do with coming into relationship with my feminine. And as women our age, I think I might be older than you, coming of age in the 80s, where we had to be very masculine, right? And so the first part of my life was very masculine in orientation. And so now I have this experience. And so the more we didn't have sex, the more I felt deeper levels of passion and desire for this man. And then there's a period of, go ahead.
Well, this is so interesting though, because I'm wondering now, of course, my next question, and I want you to continue on, but I just want to know, like, would that have been possible for you to reach that point without the energy of his masculine being present there with you in that way?
This is the thing. It wasn't his masculine. It was his feminine.
Oh, ooh,
yeah.
That's really interesting.
Continue. He embodied my feminine. In fact, early on, because I was studying depth psychology, I was like, hey, would you be willing to take your Myers-Briggs? Like, and he and I are those kinds of opposites that either are like water, or what would you call it? Water or oil, or what? Like we either are like amazing together, and I'm like, I was so super serious about everything in my life and my kids and my falling apart. And he was just this meandering soul. He was so in touch with his feminine. Yeah, he wrote poetry. Like
at age 33.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there was something that happened to him that I didn't know about. And so after a point in our relationship, and of course there was all kinds of friction that happened too. And then there was a period of time where, let's just say, he went away and we really couldn't be intimate, but I could see him. And during this time where all we could do was just be and look and talk without the distraction of a restaurant or wine or whatever, that was the time. And I felt like the sense of loyalty to him that was really irrational, because I thought, this seems like I should walk away. Why do I feel this sense of loyalty? And I know it was my unconscious saying, this is your time now for your next phase. And in my solitude, so I would see him in this constrained environment. And in my solitude is now I started re-exploring my childhood religion, and I started meditating, and I had this experience in meditation where I felt a transcendent force remove my need to figure things out on my own. Like it was an embodied experience. And in solitude, I had these images of light coming out of my head and into my head, and I grew aroused. I had spiritual orgasms that I will never have with a man. Never. Like, it's amazing what you can experience in communion with just the divine, yourself, which is the bridge to whatever you want to say, quantum realm, God, the divine. So that happened while I was devoted to him, but could not be intimate with him. And now I'm being intimate with myself. So you see, the sexuality, the desire drew me in. Right. And then it was taking that away that forced me to find the self-intimacy, which is a different experience than projecting the intimacy onto the other. And
So now is choice. Like, you made the choice to stay in there. But tell me more about this loyalty that you felt to him. Where did that come from?
I don't know. It's so mysterious. Part of it was, I don't know. There's this scene that I described. So I just don't know, I want people to read the book, but I don't know what to share. There's this scene where I'm having a battle about walking away or not walking away, staying in a constrained form of relationship while he's away, or walking away. And in fact, part of me doesn't want to feel trapped. So my complex is feeling trapped. And after staying in a marriage, maybe too long, maybe not, but feeling kind of trapped, I suddenly want to reconnect with the first man from the beach. So I'm like, hey, what do I call him in there? Hey, whatever I call Rick. Hey, Rick, do you want to meet up for a drink? And I'm sure he's like, oh, okay, yeah. So we meet up and I tell him about the man and I'm whatever. And he's like, hey, you want to come over and see my new apartment? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I knew exactly what I was agreeing to this time. And I just am like, oh, right. And so then the next week I do the same thing. And then I'm like, oh, now I know what friends with benefits are. This is cool. I could just do this. And then I'm like, oh, but he's not this man. Philip, I call him in the book. He's not. And then I recognize I'm like, oh, it's not the same anymore. And then I call up my other PhD man. I'm like, hey, you want to get together for what? And we make out. And I'm like, oh, you're still so yummy. Oh, in my head, I'm like, damn it, that doesn't feel the same either. There's something about this man, about Philip, that I need to see through. And so lots of journaling, lots of letter writing about him, like tell me more about like why, how you, like what happened, like all this stuff. And I don't know, I just feel like even now, sometimes you don't find there are deeper and deeper layers of meaning in your journey. So it's not like after 10 years and you have this new life that you're like, oh, I'm done with that. It's still like unfolding and you can see what you couldn't see and you understand your mother wound even deeper and there's more like it never ends actually, but you're done with the hard part. Like you faced your shadow, you faced the parts of you that that were difficult. You've hopefully embraced potentials that you wouldn't embrace before. And so it's just so rich. Like everybody's life, they just have this curiosity it's so rich. So anyway, at some point that relationship ends and it's like, oh, that's what that was all about. It was like so clear, like that's done.
You've said that word curiosity a few times, and that's one of my favorite words as well, because that is the state of being that allows us to continue seeking more and to seek answers within ourselves. And I love the transformation, the rebuilding of yourself and how that happened through experience over time, because it's happening, and maybe you would agree with this or not, but it's happening whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
This transformation happens whether we realize it or not. And so the question at the end of the day becomes, do we want to play an active role in this transformation, or are we going to be okay with ending up somewhere in 10 years, maybe continuing to allow others to co-author our stories and not really stepping back into the driver's seat in so many ways. The dating thing is such a big subject, and I can tell from this conversation that in your memoir there's going to be a lot of really juicy wisdom in those pages, and I am so excited to read it. I have so many more questions, but I want to be respectful of your time too. And maybe I could have you back on again and we can talk more.
Of course. I have my favorites back on my podcast. I'm like, oh, we got to have another talk. So absolutely. I love it. I love your energy. Yeah.
Thank you. I have so many thoughts, but I'm going to shut them down right now. So, because I just want to know, is there anything that you want to share with my community that, just in closing? Also, where can we find you? Most definitely, I'll put everything they need to know in the show notes with links and things like that. So go ahead.
Yeah. I think my parting thought would be that, you're so important. Everyone is really important to everything, to what's going on in the world. So, your work as ripple effects that you don't know, your individual work. And when I take on clients, sometimes I can immediately tell whether they'll stay in the personal or whether they're being called, and archetypal images will show up in their dreams, or I'm like, oh my God, you're a modern embodiment of Artemis. Like, now let's dig into you being conscious of what are the traits of Artemis that you didn't even know that you had, but I can see in you. So no matter what, like, we all have this inner division. That's why we have a lot of outer division in the world. And we're being called upon right now, those of us who can be conscious. So everybody's playing their role. All the bad characters are playing the role that they're supposed to play. And what is happening at a deeper level and higher level is that there is a kind of reckoning going on that has to do with reconciling what appears to be an opposition. So when we find out what is an opposition in ourselves, and it could be something like, I mean, I remember there was a time when I thought, can I be the kind of mom I want to be and be a professional? And I think a lot of women do that, right? And I decided for me, that meant not going the corporate route, but being more of an entrepreneur. And I went to a conference just to get over that limiting belief. I was like undercutting myself, right? And I'm like, yeah, damn right I can be. I can do that, right? And so whatever the opposition is, there is opposition. There is friction. It could be, it could be that you as a young child were told, well, you're never going to make any money doing that. And you just buried it. But what you don't realize is that whatever is in the shadow, it gathers energy and then it finds its way through a crack. And it won't be in a way that you like. And so consciousness, it just comes to, and you're like, oh, what is the meaning of this? And then later on, you're like, oh, because I was ignoring that part of me. And so, a great place to see where you have opposition is to journal about where you have the strongest emotions, strongest emotional reactions. If it's like, if you can't watch the news and be like neutral about it, that's a great place to start with your parental complexes, right? Because that's stuff going on. Yeah, it's upsetting. But if you're like, whoa, like you're super angry, you're not angry about what you think you're angry about. Right. And so that's a good like doorway to discovering what is the inner opposition that is seeking to be reconciled. And so when you reconcile opposing forces, Carl Jung's theory of the transcendent third, when you can hold them, the tension between them, then eventually a new insight comes where you're like, oh, here's how I can reconcile that. So can you tell, like, then you release, you lose weight, your headaches go away. You find the answer because now your central nervous system is like, oh, now I actually can see what I couldn't see before. That's where I want to go. So the individual work is just really important. So I guess that would be my parting thought.
Thank you. I've got to ask more questions just for a second. Do you think though that opposing energy within us, and I know that we all feel it, whether we've ever put language to it or not, it is there, it exists. Do you think when you reconcile that opposing energy, do you think that's what people are talking about when they're talking about finding your energetic flow? Because you go from that tension and that opposing state of being into a flow state where you, like you said, your nervous system is more regulated. You can see things that are upsetting and be in them without becoming them.
Yeah.
This societal shift that I see right now, and I have kids in their 30s, early to mid 30s, the societal shift that I see of being more open and embracing new ideas and beliefs and people, and keep in mind, I'm here on the West Coast, so it's a little bit different in the Portland, Oregon area, but this lack of adherence to this system that is often referred to as patriarchal. I think a lot of people, when they hear the word patriarchy, they want to just automatically define it as a man or, masculine energy. And it's really not that. You say some beautiful words about this in your book that I've been reading, the Soul Awakening booking, or The Soul Is Your Soul Talking. I keep saying Soul Awakening because that's how it feels when I'm reading it. But I'll link to
I love it.
Note. Yes. Anyway, so I know we're supposed to be closing this down, but can you just maybe give us just an overview again of how important it is for us as individuals to take responsibility for this energetic flow that is already contained within us, that we have the ability to tap into to access more peace, more love, more moments of joy throughout the day, rather than being in a constant state of reactivity. And then the global overarching impact that that can make on us as society, should we choose to embrace that.
I love that you present it as responsibility. So there are people who are completely unconscious and we want to be mad at them, but they are unconscious. So we not only have, to me, a responsibility or a privilege to be that we already have consciousness. If you can self-reflect about your own behavior and, ooh, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, you got consciousness. So yes, you're responsible now. And it's just becoming more aware and more. I think then those of us who are conscious, that we can be conscious on behalf of others who are not, and work for the greater good of everyone, right? They cannot be conscious. They're agitators. They're playing the role perfectly, which is to prompt consciousness expansion only comes from friction. So they are the agitators. So you can either be a victim. Now, in the meantime, the part where we do need to resist is to resist to the extent that we advocate and stand up for people who are being scapegoated and attacked. But we do not want to resist. We do not want to resist the dismantling of these systems. We don't want to resist the negative energy. We want to go, okay, you people do that. And instead, we need to start imagining into the future. And we need to start building the new world, because what we resist persists. So
that's true.
This is right. Yeah. So you're either in fear or love. Now, responsibility. Okay. Is it easier to be a victim? Yeah, but that's what you're being. I'm sorry. That's what you're being. And it's a lot more fun to be a manifester than a victim. So you can be a victim.
Yeah. Okay,
and that's
so
your choice.
I've never really heard someone identify or define the opposite of a victim.
Yeah, a manifester.
That's so true. If you're not a victim, what are you? Is there a neutral place, though, where you just take up space and you're neither or?
Oh, I don't know. I like Marianne Williamson, and there's another person who says this too, and I really like it. You're either in love or fear. So there's not really a middle space.
Okay. Yeah. So there's something to think about.
Yeah, there's different gradations, right? Like being in love doesn't mean you have to go be a spiritual teacher. Being in love could be, every time I go to the gas station, buy my Diet Coke, I'm going to make sure I compliment the cashier. That's love. That's lovely, right?
Yes. Yes, that's embracing a different way of being.
That's right. So you're in love. Yeah.
It's gratitude. I think that love and gratitude are synonymous. That you really can't have.
Yeah, so gratitude is an expression of love. Hate is an expression of fear. So some people say hate is the opposite of love, and it's not. Hate is just a byproduct of fear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Neediness.
I dated a therapist, a psychedelic therapist, actually. He's amazing. But I dated him for 3 years, and that was probably the healthiest adult relationship that I could have possibly had during my transition time. But he, in his early work, he would work with men who were in programs because of domestic abuse or violence, and so they'd been put into court mandated programs. And in his experience, he learned and shared with me that the root of all anger is fear or sadness.
Yes.
And so when we are approaching people who are very angry, we can look at them and we can understand that this is either coming from a place of fear or sadness. And with that perspective, I look at people and it allows me to feel compassion for them. Yeah. For the suffering that they're enduring, whether they realize it or not on a day-to-day basis, but to also have compassion and invite them into a space where we can offer them peace and safety and security.
And we shouldn't.
It's appropriate.
Yes. And here's the thing, like you and I could do that. Other people can't do that. So you don't even have to go so far as to feel compassion for people who it's difficult to feel compassion for. You just need to set it aside. And you need to, because you're actually not able to truly feel compassion for someone else unless you have found it in yourself.
Mm-hmm. Like we were talking about earlier.
You really just can't, you can't. You can't. Because if you don't know compassion, how can you say you're feeling compassionate for someone? You maybe are saying a concept, but you're not embodying compassion. So I don't think we should pressure people to feel compassion for people that it's very difficult. Let us do that. let us do that for you. You just work, you know what I'm saying? You just work on exploring your inner division. And as you do that, you will show up more clear-headed. And as I say to the people who want to be warriors, because I'm an activist, warriors are not emotional. True warriors are strategic. And so if you get triggered, no, you can't be a warrior. Go work on your triggering. And I think everybody needs to be working on their triggering right now. I think that's part of like our task. And then for those of us who can be like, well, that's so cute that you are such a misogynist. Oh my God, your misogyny is it's just cute. Then you can do that, right? And then they're like, they don't expect that. So there's a whole psychology behind nonviolent resistance too. It's like reacting in a way that you're not feeding their monster. So if you're not ready not to feed their monster, just stay away from those people.
I appreciate you bringing clarity to that, because that is so true. I get in my own little bubble sometimes in the way that I work, and without realizing that there are ramifications for personal interactions with people who may not have the capacity to meet you where you are, or if you're stepping into a space where you are unsure. Like you just said, it's best to just stand your position and not step forward.
And I help people with that. I help people who are ready, who are like, they don't trigger me anymore. And I'm like, okay, let's have some fun. I will teach you exactly how to respond and what to say to disarm them and accidentally back them up into self-reflection. You can get some of them there. So I wanted to say one more thing about patriarchy, because I think it's really important for people, and especially women, to understand that patriarchal systems are systems that harm men too. And so I have a blog post about why patriarchy harms men too. And it's almost the women's patriarchal wound is almost easier to overcome, especially now, because we can fight back. How do you overcome it? You just say, F off, man, I'm doing what I want. And we are not oppressed right now. Yes, there is sexism and discrimination. We are not oppressed. Don't let anybody convince you that you're oppressed. Men's patriarchal wound gets healed by changing the definition of masculine. That's harder. And it's other men who beat up and belittle and emasculate men for not being a certain kind of man. It's not women. The problem is other men. So we need to embrace the quality men who sometimes are better feminists than some women. So we can't make it a man-woman thing anymore, because there are very evil women right now. They are just as evil as some evil men. So it's not a gender thing. It is a systems thing that it's the toxic masculine. And the masculine in and of itself, is a healthy masculine. It's not an emotional. It's not it's not a whiny, angry, opinionated masculine. It's reason. So I write a lot. It's one of my favorite topics, is the masculine and the feminine and patriarchy and religion and all that intersection.
Okay.
Now we're done.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to be done, but this is just so much fun. It's fascinating. So if someone wanted to reach you to become a client of yours, which to me sounds dreamy and challenging and fun. If they wanted to reach you and become a client, how would they do that? What's the quickest way for them to get in front of you?
To go to deborahlukovich.com, and it's very clear. There is a services page, and there are buttons where you can just click a free consultation. And then that's how it's very easy. Also, I have a brand new page about midlife. So midlife and individuation. So there's a hover. So if you kind of hover over the home page, it'll say, take you to that page. Or right on my home page, there's a link that goes to, I think it's called Midlife Unraveling and Individuation. And so there's a page on there, and you could do the same thing. Click. And I offer a 45-minute free consultation. And you'll walk away no matter what, even if you don't hire me, knowing a lot more than you did before.
I feel like it's Christmas right now. Like you're just giving us things for free. And I just am so grateful for that. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing all this wisdom. Thank you for this conversation. And I will absolutely get this out as quickly as I can so that people can use you as a resource, because we need people like you in our lives, especially women in midlife. So we need this so desperately, this guidance and this the light that you're shining on this path of transition in your very own unique way is very special. So thank you for doing the hard work to get here. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too.
I am excited already to have you back again.
Yay!
Yay.
I could
Okay,
talk about
Deborah,
this
thank
all day
you.
long.
Same here. Clearly, I think we're coming up on an hour and a half, which is fabulous. It's been fascinating. And again, thank you. And I'll put all the links in the show notes.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.